Good afternoon. Pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of the very innovative Swachhata Startup Challenge, conducted by Mahua in collaboration with Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, Government of India, and AFD, Government of France, as a pivot to startups in India to provide locally innovated, implementable solutions and business models in the sanitation and waste management sectors. We are happy to welcome His Excellency Emmanuel Lenain, Ambassador of France to India, and His Excellency Ugo Assuto, Ambassador of the European Union to India, who have joined us online. It is our pleasure to welcome Secretary Mahua, Sri Manoj Joshi, to chair the session. In the proceedings, we would like to request the Joint Secretary and National Mission Director, Swachh Bharat Mission Urban Government of India, Ms. Rupa Mishra, to provide an overview of the challenge.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. Respected Secretary Mahua, His Excellency Ambassador of France to India, His Excellency Ambassador of the European Union to India and Bhutan, senior officers of AFD, Mahua, and the various state governments who have joined online, our sector partners, city administrators, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is our proud privilege to be launching Swachhata Startup Challenge today. After the launch of the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 on the 1st of October 2021, various activities have been taken up with the vision of creating garbage-free cities. And on the occasion of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav and this specific fortnight that is dedicated towards smart urbanization, this Swachhata Startup Challenge, I'm sure, is a precursor to exciting activities that will be taken up at different city level and the sector of the waste management. With the permission of the chair, I would like to quickly run you through the various details that are there under the startup challenge that we are proposing. Next. So as some of you might be aware, the Swachhata Startup Challenge is something that we are implementing in partnership with DPIIT, Government of India, and AFD in the duration of January till July. And here, all startups who are registered in India and French firms who are collaborating with Indian startups as a joint venture would be eligible to participate. And the themes that we have focused are social inclusion, zero dump, meaning focusing on the legacy dump site, plastic waste management, and transparency. The challenge could be open to everyone, including the shortlisted entries from the Swachh Sarvekshan 2022. And finally, 10 startups would be selected as winners who would be then entitled to a financial award as well as incubation support. Next. The social inclusion theme would include, of course, not limited to, various innovations for improved waste collection and management with focus on low-income settlements. Also, India is committed to make the transition from manhole to machine holes. So we'll be looking at low-cost, efficient mechanical solutions for cleaning septic tanks and sewer lines. Operation and maintenance of community and public toilets to have true functional sanitation infrastructure would be a key area. Another area of interest would be the newly included used water management under the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0, and therefore the related innovations and technologies related to it. The second theme, which is around the zero dump, would be looking at solutions for tracking segregated door-to-door collection of solid waste, processing and recycling of all segregated fractions of solid waste, and very importantly, low-cost portable solutions for remediation of legacy dump sites. The third theme would center around plastic waste management and with various nuances like processing and recycling of plastic waste, solutions to minimize the degradation of plastic during recycling, plastic waste management in areas of the eco-sensitive areas, collection of multi-layer plastic and its disposal, alternatives of single-use plastic, behavior change, etc. And transparency would be looking at technological innovations on real-time monitoring of operations and waste management, tracking the flow of goods from manufacture to the end of the life cycle or the disposal, and various solutions that calculate the environmental, social, and economic value of goods, especially plastics. And the entire scoring would be out of 100 marks. We have selected around 6 areas of giving the weightage. And while uniqueness, robustness, and replicability and scalability will be assessed, we have also given focus on having women or significant number of women in the team to see the diversity of the human resources. We are also looking at the social impact strategy, and we're also looking as to what would the entity do with the prize as a game changer for the organization. And as I was just mentioning a little while ago, the database of the shortlisted startups will be in public domain, and we will be selecting the 10 startups in June, by June end or July first week. And they will be awarded around 25 lakh rupees, along with 1 year of dedicated incubation support from a French tech. And the flow of events starts from today with a launch, which all of us will witness in a few minutes. And then the applications submission begins, and it is there till 31st of March. And the pre-selection phase begins from the 1st of April, will be done by the end of April. The selection of the final winners, we will try and finalize it by June. And then by July, we will be having the awards ceremony. And all the applications, all the applicants are requested to apply only online on this particular portal detail as we have shown here, which will be launched in a little while. With this, we thank all the stakeholders, all our partners in conceptualizing the Startup Challenge. And from Mahua, we wish all the participants a wonderful next 6 months for great participation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We now request His Excellency Emmanuel Lenin, Ambassador of France to India, to deliver a keynote speech. Mr. Lenin, whose diplomatic career has spanned close to 55 years, has served in various capacities in the French Foreign Ministry's United Nations Department, as France's political counselor in Beijing and Consul General in Shanghai, and more recently as Director for the Asia Pacific Division of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Development, and Diplomatic Advisor to the Prime Minister. His Excellency, Ambassador of France to India.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Pleasure to start the year with you, and Happy New Year to everybody. I'm delighted today to witness this launch of the AFD Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs.
Sorry, sir. Probably there's some issue with the audio. You're not audible.
I'm sorry, but I should be on, actually. You can not hear me, or you can hear me not very clearly?
I can hear you.
You can or you cannot?
I can, but the lady doesn't, apparently.
I'm a bit sorry for that.
It works really well. I think you can continue. It works really well for us. Thank you.
Maybe could those who can hear me raise their hands so that I can have an idea? Well, that's not too bad. That is not too bad. Okay. Well, so I'm sorry for those who can't, but I cannot do any better with the equipment. I was just saying that, so that I'm delighted to attend startup challenge. And I think it's a very important joint action to fight against waste management and plastic pollution. Thank you very much for organizing that. I think it's a clear recognition of our long-standing partnership with the Indian Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and also on, and it's the first concrete step on our joint action towards promoting more and more partnership to tackle the issue of plastic pollution into water systems and ocean, which is a key priority of our Indo-Pacific agenda. And as you've seen and I see Hugo from the EU, it's a key aspect of the strategy, of the EU strategy that was released in September 2021. Well, it's very timely also, according to us, because it takes place before UNEA 5.2, which will take place in Nairobi from February 28 to March 2. Well, and as you may know, France and the EU will co-sponsor a resolution in view to establish an intergovernmental committee to negotiate, and I know it's India is not exactly on the same position, a legally binding global agreement on plastics, but even though I think there's room for discussion between our two delegations, two countries, and it's important that we try to bridge the gap. And it's an important agreement because obviously it will help addressing the challenge of plastic pollution and its impact on health, ecosystems, and landscape. And we feel that we can really make progress on that. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can hear you. So please mute your microphone. This challenge I was saying is also very timely because it's an occasion to expand our effort and to work more with the EU. As you know, France right now holds for this semester the presidency of the Council of the EU, and we feel that we should and we did prioritize the Indo-Pacific and the fight against plastic pollution on one of the very top priority. And there will be some very concrete actions. Let me also commend AFD, the French Development Agency, headed by Mr. Bruno Boll, who is next to me in this room, and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs for their efforts to reach that goal. I think it's a great idea. It's magnificent to reward 10 startups working at the crossroads of technology and social innovation. It's really what it should be, and I think the support there will be provided will be key for the development. I think, as you know, they will get customized professional support for 1 year. And AFD has also committed to a seed funding of 30,000 euro to each of the 10 winning candidates. So congratulations for that also. I think it will prove to be a great success. And it will be an example. I think we're setting an example. It will inform cities, municipalities, how to streamline waste collection, how to better segregate waste. And it will facilitate knowledge exchange, experience sharing, best practice. I think we are at the beginning of a process, but this sort of initiative will really help. So thank you very much. Thank you for the organizer. Thank you for the panelists. And really looking forward to a discussion on this forum and on the role of technology and business innovation to reinforce India waste sector. Thank you very much looking forward to your discussion. Thank you.
Astuto, Ambassador of the European Union to India, to deliver a keynote speech. Mr. Astuto, a long-standing diplomat of the Italian Foreign Service, has served in the embassies in Nairobi and London, in the permanent representation in Brussels and in the embassy in Delhi, in European External Action Service in Brussels, as Principal Director for Asia in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Rome, and has been in his current posting since October 2019. His Excellency, Ambassador of European Union to India.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. So, Ambassador, Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today with you all to discuss about the role of startups in fostering the green transition, because if I understand well, that's the basic focus of this Swachhata Startup Challenge. So I'm grateful to the Agence Française de Développement and to the French Embassy and to France as current rotating presidency of the European Union to organize this event. It's a very timely event because we do indeed need a whole of society approach to face the change of paradigm that is required to meet the challenge of sustainable development. In the European Union, we have mobilized domestically by launching a major policy initiative, the Green Deal. It's a policy initiative underpinned by mandatory legislation, so not just generic aspirations, but legal compulsion. The basic message of the EU Green Deal is twofold. First one, the business as usual is not an option, because science tells us that climate change, biodiversity loss, an unsustainable pattern of production and consumption, these are putting at risk our lives and the lives of the next generation. The second point underpinning the Green Deal is that we must engage in the green transition while leaving no one behind. Solutions can only be holistic and integrated, be it domestically or globally. And I think that the COVID pandemic has made it ever more apparent that we cannot afford to ignore what's happening in our neighbor's house. We are all together. And the international community has come together in Glasgow very recently to try to stem the tide of climate change and to make sure that we do not miss the target of maximum 1.5 degrees Celsius on per temperature rise. And the biodiversity challenge is equally compelling. And it demands fast and coordinated action. But if we want to succeed, we need all stakeholders to come together and engage. Times of crisis call for new thinkers, call for innovators. Take plastic waste. It's the proliferation of plastic waste the past decade has been momentous and unsustainable. Single-use plastic needs to be phased out, replaced by cleaner, recyclable, bio-based materials, as required by a circular economy. The European Union Action Plan on Circular Economy intends to foster alternative sustainable products, standards, practices, with the aim to achieve a waste-free circular economy. It's a challenge. It's not going to be easy. It will take time, but there is no alternative. And in a globalized, interconnected economy, a development of the sort cannot happen in isolation. So, as Emmanuel said earlier, the international community is about to gather in Nairobi for the UN Environment Assembly. And there we will discuss the need for a global agreement on plastics, like we have global agreements on climate or on biodiversity. We will try to chart a predictable course for business and for households, for citizens, in order for them to adapt and to promote a timely and orderly transition. The European Union and the Indian government have been working together for quite a while towards the shared goal of a circular economy. And the European Union has also been a partner with the Ministry of Housing for a number of years on fostering sustainable urbanization practices. Together, the European Union, its 27 member states and India can be leaders in the green transition. And against this background, the Swachhata Startup Challenge is a very fitting initiative. I trust that it will contribute to feed ambition and creativity in developing sustainable business. With this, let me conclude and thank you all very much.
We now come to the main item of today's event, the formal launch of the Swachhata Startup Challenge by Secretary Mahua and dignitaries present. We will now see a short video of the proposed startup challenge. I now request the dignitaries to formally launch the website of the Startup Challenge. I now request Secretary Mahua Sri Manoj Joshi to address the audience. Sri Joshi belongs to a 1989 batch of Indian Administrative Service from Kerala cadre and currently is working as Secretary in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. Sri Joshi has held various assignments in union and state governments covering food processing, finance, personnel, public works, commerce and industries, health and family welfare, ports, transport, in Kerala State Industrial Development Corporation, etc. He has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the National Institute of Technology, Jaipur, Rajasthan. Secretary, sir.
His Excellency, Ambassador of France to India, Ambassador of EU to India and Bhutan, Country Director AFD, Joint Secretary Rupa Mishra, colleagues from the Ministry and from AFD, and representatives from various urban local bodies in India. The Swachh Bharat Mission Urban was launched in October 2014 by Honorable Prime Minister. And it has resulted in fundamental behavioral change in urban India. We have seen in the last 7 years radical change in urban sanitation. Our cities, streets, and neighborhood have become cleaner. The change in attitude and mindset. From 18% of waste generated being processed in 2014, we are now 71% of waste is processed. 97% of wards in the country are practicing 100% door-to-door collection, while 87% practice 100% source segregation. We have also seen now aspirational outcomes we have envisaging in the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban 2. We're targeting all the urban local bodies to be at least open defecation free +1 and 3-star certified. On October 1st, 2021, Honorable Prime Minister launched the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban 2.0 with a vision of making all cities garbage free, and within 3 months of launch, the mission has achieved significant strides. We have been working with the French government and AFD on a number of issues in urban India, more so in the mobility and also in cleanliness campaigns. Particularly in mobility area, AFD has been funding various green initiatives of urban metro and other mobility plans. And so collaboration between AFD and India and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs is going much beyond these areas in environment, in climate change, in cleanliness. And I hope that our collaboration would further achieve these agendas. In particular, I think in case of cleanliness campaign, Swachh Bharat Mission, the technological input to the startups from AFD and other French companies would go a long way in supporting them, because this is India's challenges, whether it's in the plastics, single-use plastics, and other technological area, are not just the resource-wise, it's the habits, it's the technology, it's the management practices. And the change which improved management practices also can bring in cleanliness are remarkable. That's why we look forward to this technological challenge, particularly from both the management and new practices perspective as well as the technology perspective. So really look forward to guidance from our ministry, from French companies, from other institutions to startups, because there is an investment approach, there is an expenditure approach to entire cleanliness campaign, but along with that, the role of local startups is very, very important, particularly in single-use plastics. Find that the challenges are manifold. Many governments have, in the states and cities, have banned them at various points of time, but implementation challenge in single-use plastic is not easy, and you need industry-involved startup methods to tackle the issue of single-use plastic. Similarly, the segregation and the dump site remediation or processing of waste requires a large-scale private investment, private intervention, which is happening in Indian cities, but far more needs to be done because the capacity of urban local bodies is limited, and without private sector involvement, there are challenges. So I really look forward to collaboration with uh, EU, with the French government, AFD, and other French and other European companies. And with that, I thank once again AFD and French and EU uh, uh, ambassadors and other officials in participating with us in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are thankful. We will now, in the second session, we will have a panel discussion on the role of technology and business innovation to reinforce the Indian waste sector. We have an impressive lineup of panelists who will be sharing their experiences and views. The panelists include Robin Ratnaswamy, SPM Urban Mission Director of Chhattisgarh State, Divya Jyoti Parida, Collector of Sambalpur District of Odisha and Administrator Sambalpur Municipal Corporation. Leela Joyce, Manager, ZOSU Plastics Commission, City of Malice. Wilma Rodriguez, the CEO, Sahas Zero Waste, and Maya Chandrasekharan, co-founder and managing director, Green Arthur. I would like to formally invite Sri Anand Arvamudam, Sector Lead Climate Action of Will Grow Innovations Foundation, to moderate the panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Anand.
Thank you very much, madam. And as you mentioned, this is a very impressive set of panelists whom we have today to speak to us about the role of technology and business innovation to reinforce the Indian waste sector. We have representatives who are implementers themselves, who have seen the Swachh Bharat mission in action. And we have an entrepreneur like Wilma, who has been actively promoting these solutions. And we have a representative from the investment sector in the form of Maya, who actually backs some of these technologies with investments. To start off, I think I will pick up a line which was mentioned by His Excellency Ambassador Astuto, who mentioned that in the current scenario, business as usual is no longer an option. Given the way that the world is changing and given the focus that has been today put upon cleanliness, upon Swachhata, and the need to manage our waste better, I think these words ring very true. And who better than innovative startups, young entrepreneurs who are brimming with ideas to actually take up this challenge and change the way that we do our business. Today's session is primarily meant for such entrepreneurs who will be applying for the Swachhata challenge. Many of them are tuned in right now to this panel, and many more will be listening to the recorded version of this panel discussion. With that, let me plunge straight away into our panel discussion and seek the experience of our panelists to throw light upon some of the challenges. I will let me start with Sri Saumil Chaube, who is currently the mission director for the Swachh Bharat mission in the state of Chhattisgarh. Chaubeji, Chhattisgarh has time and again, I think if I'm not mistaken, the last 3 years been selected through the Swachhata Survekshan as the cleanest state. I'm sure that you must be having a lot of experience and a lot of interesting insights into how this kind of achievement has been possible. I would request you to share some of your experiences and also maybe highlight a little bit about the use of technology and how technology played a role in helping Chhattisgarh to maintain this, preeminent position as far as cleanliness of the state is concerned.
Thank you so much. Good evening to all the dignitaries present here. I'd like to introduce the state first because it's very important to understand the state. Chhattisgarh as a state is primary an agricultural state and it is sparsely urbanized. So basically the only 25% of our population is urbanized and we have 169 cities. So that itself goes on to show that the sizes of our cities are small and geographical areas of our cities are huge. So this is different from the other cities that we may have in say Uttar Pradesh or Maharashtra, where urbanization is more and population is more dense. So this is a unique challenge in itself. What we did in Chhattisgarh was to treat this as a challenge for a startup, because what a startup usually does. Startup usually inculcates entrepreneurship. It makes sure that it generates revenue because that's very important for a startup. Also, the startup needs to have a lot of scalability because you can implement a pilot project in a ward or in a city, but you to implement it in a state, you have to think of scalability like the startups do. And also the startups do not have much frills. So if we involve in a lot of pomp and show, and then if we go for a conventional approach, it would cost us a lot, and the end result, of course, for both of the things would be the same. So we made sure that we think of it like a startup. Primarily also because when we started with Swachh Bharat Mission 1.0, there were only 4 people in my office. So that is a startup in itself. And the challenge was to collect waste from 12.5 lakh households every day. That amounts to 1,600 metric tons. And we had no infrastructure and no setup whatsoever on how to do this. So we took this up as a challenge, because if we went for a conventional approach and we adopted a vendor, it would have cost us to the tune of 2,000 crores and an yearly expenditure of about 400 crores, which was obviously not sustainable considering the economies of our cities. So we thought of it as a startup, and we picked up a city called Ambikapur in our state, which is a small city of population of about 100,000. And we took this as a pilot project. What we did over here was that we trained 500 women SHG members, women self-help group members, and we oriented them to collect waste from each household every day and segregate it into wet and dry waste. As simple as it may sound, collecting waste from 100,000 people every day is a Herculean task in itself. And to segregate it when there's nobody else segregating in the entire nation, that was a big challenge. So that initially we trained them to segregate it into wet and dry waste. And then we further trained them to segregate these dry wastes into 17 categories and wet waste into 14 categories. And out of these 17 categories of dry waste, we trained them to further segregate it into 256 categories. And when they did that, we taught them that this waste has an inherent wealth hidden inside it. Like the concept of waste to wealth was pretty new when SBM 1.0 was launched. So we took this to heart and we made sure that we demonstrated how this waste can generate wealth. And after segregating our dry waste into 256 categories, we showed them a way in which they could, earn from selling this to the recyclers. That we did. We involved a lot of people over there. The state team also went over there, camped over there. I myself went. The then mission director also went over there. So all of us camped over there, and we made sure that we made people realize that wealth can be generated from these kind of waste. So once that thing was done, that Ambikapur model was set up, we in the end we made sure that every household in Ambikapur segregated its waste into wet and dry waste, and they gave them to these 500 Swachhata Didis, who are women self-help group members. And inherently, these women SHG members, they became entrepreneurs themselves. And initially, as an angel investor, government invested about 5 crore rupees in Ambikapur to set all this up. And eventually, this model became self-sustainable, and they started generating revenue. So this was a very welcome surprise for us as well. And that is how the Mission Clean City model of Chhattisgarh was born. And then we had to think of scalability. Ambikapur model worked perfectly fine, but then we had to think of scalability to improve, to extend it to all the 169 cities of the state. So that's what we did initially. We took the Ambikapur model when we scaled it up to the entire state. And how we did that is a long story in itself, and I don't know how much time do I have. So I'd just like to focus on what technology interventions we did over there. Like ma'am said over here, the Swachh Technology Challenge has basically four verticals: social inclusion, zero dump, plastic waste management, and transparency. So in our model of Chhattisgarh, the Mission Clean City model, the first thing that was very important was social inclusion. Social inclusion was very important, and how we involve technology into that is also something that we needed to look upon. So for social inclusion, we realized that these women SHG members were intermittent in coming and going. They did not have much motivation to work. And once they did, there were a lot of complaints of women SHG members not going to the houses and not collecting the waste, not segregating it properly. Because like in every government scheme, there are lacunas, and people don't, usually like to work that much sometimes. So that is why we needed to involve a mobile app, which is called Nishtha app. We generated a Nishtha app, which is an Android application. And through this application, we made sure that all our women SHG members, all of the people who are involved in sanitation, they are assigned predefined geolocations where they have to work. For example, if a women SHG member is to collect waste from ward number 40, so the geolocation was mapped in the app. And once she started her duty, she needed to click a selfie. A selfie clicking is a very simple process. So once she did that, that attendance was marked. And once she completed her work, she could sign out through a selfie again. So that is why we made sure that that is how we made sure that every women SHG members go to their wards, collect the waste. And through this app, we also made sure that the payments to these women SHG members are linked to their attendance. So all the payrolls that were generated were done through this app, the Nishtha app. And if somehow they marked their attendance from a different geolocation, their attendance was not taken. So this is a very simple app in itself, but to train these 500 or 10,000, in fact, 10,000 women SHG members in the entire state to do this was a challenge in itself. And a lot of challenges came our way. And through these challenges, we made sure that this app was refined every day, every now and then. And now we have a working system where all our attendances are done through this app. All our payrolls are being generated through this app. And if somebody marks his attendance from a different geolocation, it is failed. It is not allowed. And also the facial recognition technology we've incorporated in this app. So the app can identify whether or not the attendance being marked is being done by the same person itself, or is it some other person. So this is how we made sure that people actually work. The second thing was quality assurance or the service level benchmarking. So how do we do that? That was also very important. So this is something that cannot be done because waste collection and waste processing is a very dynamic thing. So we realized that because this waste is being generated by our citizens themselves, so it was very important to have a important or a robust grievance redressal mechanism in place. So for this, we developed a toll-free number which is called Nidan 1100. So all you needed to do was dial 1100, and if you have any complaint related to solid waste management, it would be logged, it would be recorded, and it would be sent to the Swachhata app, which the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs had developed. So we basically interlinked the Swachhata app and our Nidan 11, so Nidan 1100 toll-free number, and through this, these complaints were sent to the concerned ward inspectors, who in turn would go to the wards and check whether or not the Didis have come and collected the waste, or whether or not the processing is being done properly. And that is not it. Once this complaint was resolved at the ward level, we made sure that we put in a feedback mechanism in place, and the complaint was closed only when the citizen said that the complaint was actually resolved. So that is how we made sure that the quality was assured over here. So these are the two things that we did in Chhattisgarh, and that is how we made sure that every one of our Swachhata Didis go to their go to these 12 lakh households and collect their waste, and also the citizens are satisfied. So this is what we did, and also zero dump model. Zero dump model is something that Chhattisgarh was the pilot in the entire nation. I believe only Chhattisgarh claims to be a zero landfill state, because in our state there is no waste that goes to the landfills, because each category of waste is further categorized into various categories. Like I said, dry waste is categorized into 256 categories and wet waste into 14. And once they are processed completely, there is no waste left to go to the landfills. So this is also a very unique model. And how technology is important over here is something that we are also looking on. Right now, the work is mostly manual. And because it is mostly manual, there are some areas where we have to intervene a lot. So with this Swachh Technology Challenge, we are looking for technologies which could help us, streamline this process completely, to automate this process completely, and also make sure that we, as a state mission directorate or the ULB, as a monitoring agency itself, can dynamically check whether or not these waste collectors go to their houses or not, whether or not this processing is done properly, or the quality is assured. So this is the Chhattisgarh model in a nutshell. I tried to be brief as possible, and I think if there's any question or something that you'd like to know, I'd be happy to answer it.
Thank you so much, Chaubeji, and we'll definitely come back. I'm sure even within the panel there are some questions, but we will come back to you after some of the other speakers have their introductory session. I'd like to request Sri Dibyajyoti Parita ji. Parita ji is IAS officer who is currently serving as the DM Sambalpur. But his previous assignment was at Rourkela, and he was posted as the CEO Smart City Rourkela. And during this time, during the Swachh Sarvekshan, Rourkela performed very well, getting the 1-star rating. Parita ji, if you are here with us, I would like to request you to share a few experiences during your tenure as the CEO of the Smart City at Rourkela, and maybe also some light upon how technology was used to achieve efficiency of the working of the state urban local body. Over to you, Parita ji.
Very good afternoon to all of you. It's indeed a pleasure to be among all the esteemed dignitaries here. Our journey in the solid waste and liquid waste management has been a journey where we looked into the transformative aspects of solid waste management. By transformative aspect, what I mean is that at different levels of waste management, how we can bring in technology through the involvement of startups to produce some wealth out of the waste. As ULB, we tried to reduce the waste at first, at source. How could we do that is through the invent of a cold storage mechanism. As we found out that in Rourkela, one of the major source of bulk waste production was the rotting of vegetables, which were not sold due to the ongoing COVID scenario in the state. And we tried to reduce that waste. We collaborated with many of the startups who came up with unique solutions, who created cold storage, who created IoT mechanisms where a real-time assessment of our waste was made. We prevented the waste from forming by increasing the shelf life of vegetables, of various perishable items, resulting in a reduction of waste to the level of 200 tons on a regular basis. And this actually reduced our waste load at the initial point. This activity of ours, where we collaborated with a startup known as Coil Fresh, made us a winner in the Bloomberg Philanthropy Global Mayors Challenge. And we continue to scale up this process into other habitations, other markets, where we try to reduce the waste generation at the beginning. Next, going to the wastage that comes out, and out of it we carry out segregation of waste into wet waste and dry waste. There also, we took the help of women's self-help groups as entrepreneurs, small startups. We provided them with finance, we provided them with the technical know-how so that they can process the waste and produce organic matter, which we call as Swachhata. This this process was spearheaded by our H&UD department, where we produced more than 200 metric tons of organic produce from the waste, the wet waste that we used to produce. At the same time, we focused on how to replace plastic. In our country, and this must be a problem in other countries also, the substitute for plastics are very less. And at the same time, the substitutes are very costly. So a lot of innovation, a lot of finance has to go into finding a solution for biodegradable plastics or substitute products. If we don't find a solution to this problem, we won't be able to solve the problem of plastic waste, especially single-use plastics. So a lot of startups came up and collaborated with us, and we are coming up with a lot of technology where we can change the nature of plastic processing and reduce the legacy waste. At the same time, we also focused on liquid waste management, where modular septic tanks, modular sewage treatment plants are being designed and planned to be set up, which will look into the aspect of liquid waste management in unplanned areas of the city, in slum areas where we do not have such big facilities, such underground networks which can take the waste and process them. So at every junction, you would see that startups have a very important role to play, but these startups need to be nurtured. They need finance, they need R&D facilities, which can help them a lot in developing their concept into viable solutions. And at the same time, they require a lot of handholding from the urban local bodies so that they can nourish and they can scale up their activity to a level where we can solve this burgeoning problem of solid and liquid waste management. Thank you.
Thank you, Paridaji. And you're absolutely right. And we hope that this particular challenge will give that opportunity to nourish the startups and give them the right direction so that they can solve some of the pressing problems. One of the beauties of this challenge is that it is an international collaboration. As mentioned, the AFD is playing an active role in taking this challenge to the entrepreneurs of the country. And we are very lucky to have Ms. Leela Durix, who is joining us from Paris. Ms. Durix is the manager for the zero single-use plastic ambition of the city of Paris. Now, there are a lot of very important events coming up for the city of Paris. As we all know, the 2024 Olympics is going to be hosted by Paris, and the city has an ambition to completely get rid of single-use plastics by that time frame. Ms. Durix, if you're with us, I would request you to tell us a little bit about this ambition of the city of Paris and how the city is going about achieving this ambition.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's a real pleasure to share the vision of the city of Paris during this panel. Our zero single-use plastic ambition is one of the legacy, as you introduced, is one of the legacy we want for Paris Olympic and Paralympic Games of 2024. For us, these games are a way to go faster and further in every field where our Parisian citizens expect concrete progress, and the drastic reduction of single-use plastic is one of them. Before sharing how we are building this ambition with the private sector, I would like to take a few minutes to explain our vision, and this will give you an understanding on how we work with the startup ecosystem to build this ambition. First of all, this is important to start with the definition. What do we consider as a single-use plastic? The city of Paris is aligned with the European vision, which define a single-use plastic as a packaging which is partially or totally made of plastics. This means that cans, paper, cardboard, or even bio-based plastic are understood as single-use plastic. Second, what kind of single-use plastic are we targeting? Single-use packaging are not only found in the food and beverage sectors. Building sectors, health and hygiene, or even cigarette butts are source of plastic pollution for Paris. And finally, our vision regarding the three circular economy principles. We all know them: reduce, reuse, and recycle. The city of Paris chose a scope embracing only reduction and reuse. This means that recycled plastic is not part of our ambition for 2024. This being said, how do we build this ambition in interaction with the private sector? For us, entrepreneurs are key to succeed. And that's why we first started to create in 2019 a zero single-use plastic network Today, it gathers more than 900 actors from the private sectors. We have restaurants, hotels, event organizers, a lot of startups. And these networks aims at helping entrepreneurs and shopkeepers to shift to reuse solutions. A key output of this network is a guidebook to help the private sector to transition out of the single-use plastic. In this guidebook, 5 key sectors have been identified: food, events, tourism, logistics, health and hygiene. This guidebook, unfortunately in French, gather all solutions and innovation to go toward reuse or bulk solution. And finally, we engage today more than 200 shopkeepers in a refill campaign called I Choose the Water of Paris. The principle is easy. Shopkeepers allow users to refill their water bottle in their shops. In this way, it fosters the use of refillable bottle. And shopkeepers found in this campaign higher visibility with our online mapping. And I will add that the role of digital technology will be key to onboard Parisians and visitors during the Olympic Games of 2024 and make our action visible to the public and media, for example, with online mapping. And to conclude, I will share that I'm really convinced that the city of Paris will not be able to build its circular economy vision without the involvement and innovation of the startup ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Durix. I think you pointed out a very important factor, which is that it's not just the startups, it's not just the government, but also some of the intermediaries like the shopkeepers, the restaurateurs, the caterers. These are the people who also need to be involved in order to achieve some of these ambitions. With this, I'd like to move over to Ms. Wilma Rodriguez, who is part of this panel. Wilma, you have been an entrepreneur in this waste segment, I think for more than 20 years, if I'm not mistaken, and probably much before even anybody even thought of this as a segment where there is an opportunity for entrepreneurship. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey as an entrepreneur. This is for the benefit of all the waste-related entrepreneurs who are listening to this particular panel. Maybe you can also emphasize how you have seen, technology kind of changing over time as long as you have been in this sector. And of course, you also point out to me often that it's not just the technology, but it is also behavior. It is also the way in which, or it's the ambition of the entrepreneur, which is very important. So I'd like you please to highlight your journey and tell us how you have seen this sector evolving since you became part of it.
Yeah, thank you, Anant. And it's great to be here talking to other entrepreneurs, especially those of you who are equally, now understanding the situation and the crisis with respect to waste management and how this fits into the larger crisis around climate and environment. So, I actually started work with waste when I was 40 years old. So I had a career before working as a journalist, working with the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, so very different career experiences. And yet, when I moved from Mumbai to Bangalore in 2001, it was when I was very concerned with the fact that there was so much waste on our streets. And so we had in 2000 already the first municipal solid waste rules which came out, and this was a trigger for me to get into waste management because I realized that the rules talked about what we're talking today: circular economy, resource recovery, and yet there was a very little bit of work on the ground done around converting the rules into actual implementation. So in 2001, I started the NGO Sahas. The NGO looked at advocacy, looked at awareness programs, and there was a kind of gap in terms of implementation. So whilst it's great to have awareness, we really need to always convert that into actual change on the ground. And in those years, in the early years, all waste was done around NGOs and in a not-for-profit kind of mindset, which I realized very quickly had to change. And that's the reason why in 2013, I moved or transitioned or added a second entity to the NGO Sahas, which today is Sahas Zero Waste, the social enterprise with a business model. And our business model really is looking at recovery of all kinds of waste and converting it into a resource, wet waste as well as all kinds of dry waste. And our business model is on revenues from waste, from sale of waste, revenues from sale of waste, but very important, revenues from a service fee. Because it's very important for us as we talk about social inclusion to make sure that everybody working with waste has access to safe working conditions and minimum wages. So the minimum wages is possible only when the generator of waste also pays for waste appropriately, for the services that he receives for safe management and resource recovery. So this is a model now which works very well across mainly South India, I would say at the moment. But equally, whilst today Saha Zero Waste manages about 100 tons of waste across Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Goa, we're now looking at even the north, which is the NCR area, Mumbai, and all the other areas that are ready to accept a business model based on revenues from a service fee and sale of waste. We do have our main customers are the bulk generators, our large corporate campuses, institutions, but then we do work with government to help them set up the required infrastructure. So we have set up in Karnataka, in rural Karnataka, also the material recovery facilities where source segregated waste, the dry waste gets further sorted into different categories. We understand that technology has a role to play. But here I would really like to caution that this technology, especially when entrepreneurs are working, the technology that they choose must be appropriate. Because today when we're looking at the framework of waste management, resource recovery is at the core of the solution. So therefore, we need to see that the technology is appropriate to resource recovery. So for instance, when you're looking at, say, wet waste management, the 24-hour composter really would be a technology which perhaps is not appropriate because you're not really recovering or actually converting waste into compost. Likewise, if you're looking at burn technologies, where you're just burning all paper and plastic to create energy, that itself becomes a limitation because finally you really want to recycle, you want to recover all the resources from paper and plastic. So it's important when we are choosing technologies to make sure that we keep the framework of circular economy and resource recovery. And when we're talking of social inclusion, make sure that as we build infrastructure, as we put in place the systems, the people working with waste are also in line for minimum wages and safe working conditions. So that was something that I thought I could share with you today.
Thank you so much, Vilma. It's been really fascinating to hear your journey and also your views on how technology has to be appropriate for the kind of problem that you're trying to solve. I'd request Maya to share her views on a few topics. Now, Maya represents Green Artha, which is one of the pioneering funding agencies for entrepreneurs who are engaged in the waste management sector. Maya, we heard how Vilma talking about how there are so many opportunities now in the waste sector, and we heard about service fee, we heard about material recovery, and so on. So obviously, there are many different facets to the waste management sector. Looking at it from a financing viewpoint, if you were to advise an entrepreneur, what would be the most suitable form of financing that they should seek out? Is it the more traditional debt mechanism where they can take loans to build up their business? Should they go looking for equity financing? Should they look for grants to get off the ground? What's your advice, Maya, to any budding entrepreneur who's looking for financing for their waste management business?
Thanks, Anand. I'll respond to that question saying and it's possibly all three. And the reason I say that is because it really depends on where the organization is in its stage of growth, and what the requirements are for that specific business model. Very often, at a very early stage, if there is something that is being done that is a proof of concept, requires a high level of research and development, grant funding is the ideal form. It's kind of the highest risk appetite capital, and it'll support an entrepreneur to really get things off the ground, create prototypes, and test them out. That said, once an organization has got past that, it's very important that a business model is established. And that business model obviously has to have some form of a revenue coming in. And based on that business model and the type of revenue that comes in, and also the type of margins and the growth trajectory that are expected, an organization can look at other types of funding. Equity funding has, and I want to also kind of set expectations over here, because I know there are entrepreneurs who are listening, and this has traditionally been a difficult space to raise funds in. Very often, entrepreneurs have been able to raise a little bit of equity funding, not because that's necessarily what they need, but because debt funding has not been available. But I do also want to set a more sort of optimistic tone, saying that I think a lot of that is changing now. The work Swachhata does enables us to work with a number of different new and established funders, and we are seeing that there are many more people coming in on the equity and on the debt side who are realizing that there are very significant business opportunities around waste management. So depending on the type of growth trajectory that a company is looking at, equity funding can come in more associated with the organization and with kind of scaling and capacity building. Once an organization has got to a certain point and potentially feels that sort of dilutive capital is not required, and they have the ability to service debt, then possibly debt is the best way to go. It also enables the organization to replicate, and to grow across various areas, to invest in capex, to invest in machinery, to invest in plants as the business model should require. But in addition to that, I also want to call out the fact that there are opportunities these days around two areas which I would to call out. One is blended finance. So there is an opportunity to sort of mix and match, to take non-dilutive or impact capital, and use that as a way to lever and establish certain milestones and attract commercial funding. That's one opportunity. The other one, which is nascent, and which I will call out with caveats, is the ability now for some people who are working in the waste management space to tap into the nascent voluntary carbon credit markets. Now, the reason I said that I'll call this up with caveats is because obviously it is both nascent and it is challenging to tap into. There are significant costs associated with it, but these are also emerging possibilities and areas that entrepreneurs can look to for funding.
Thank you so much, Maya. That's really interesting. Maybe we can now go for a second round of comments from all the panelists, and I will start with Chaubeji. Chaubeji, you gave us a very interesting insight into how the state of Chhattisgarh has been using technology in various forms, and you mentioned about the Nishtha app, which handles the geolocation, it handles the attendance, it handles, and also we spoke about the quality assurance mechanism which is being ensured through technology. Which are some of the other areas where today you feel that there could be more which can be done, where there are certain gaps in the technology which you would be looking out for? This would really give some nice clues and pointers to the entrepreneurs who are listening, so that they can focus some of their efforts onto these areas which you mentioned. So, Chaubeji, please share your views on some of the still, the gap areas in technology which you have observed during your work with the state.
Well, I've identified a few segments in which we would really need some innovation. The first one being user charges collection. User charges are notified in each of the cities, they are being collected, but user charge is the only source of revenue which could sustain all of this. Because let's face it, we have SBM 2.0 now, but we may not have an SBM in the future, because this is something that has to be done every day, every month, every day, every year. So the user charges collection can, use some innovation over here. Maybe some startup can come and, help us devise a way in which user charge can be connected through through maybe something, because we are going for a zero waste model. Why not, charge more if somebody generates more waste, and charge less if somebody generates zero waste, or charge nothing if somebody generates zero waste. So this is something very dynamic, and I think some technology intervention may be needed over here, so that people are incentivized to generate least amount of waste, and they don't, resort to over wasteful things. The second thing that we need intervention on is like processing of the construction and demolition waste. Right now, the technologies that we have for processing all of this C&D waste is very limited. All we can do is make some tiles out of it, or maybe in fact in some of the smaller cities the C&D waste is only being used to cover up the low lying areas. So this is very basic. We need something, because a lot of waste and a lot of construction demolition waste is being generated, especially because the economy is growing fast. So a lot of construction activities are being undertaken, so the old constructions are being demolished every single day. So this can be looked into, how we can use technology to construct make it into more meaningful waste over here. Also, in wastewater reuse, uh, as a concept, the wastewater reuse is pretty nice, but it does cost a lot, and the return on investment for anyone is quite less. So if this can be, in tandem with, of course, the environment department, if a better use of this wastewater is generated, and how the wastewater is treated is, the cost can be reduced. This is also can be looked into, and also in the end, the marketing of the products that are made in the end from the dry waste and wet waste. This also could use a lot of innovation and technology. A lot of a marketplace of sorts may be created for this, and an ecosystem of marketing of this products that are generated from waste. They can also be created through some interventions of technology and application of minds, of young minds maybe. So these are the four things that I think need to be done.
Thank you. Those are really wonderful tips, and I hope all the startup entrepreneurs who are listening have made note of some of these points. Of course, this recording will be available, so that you can refresh your memories. But here are some clear areas where there are, directly from the users of these technologies, you have got some tips in terms of where there are gaps in technology. I have a question for Parida ji. During your tenure as at Rourkela, you have indicated that you worked with multiple startups, and I have to commend you for that, because as an incubator at Wilgrow, we often hear from our startups that it is extremely difficult to approach government bodies to try out our technology or to propose our technologies. What are the kind of tips that you would give to a startup? What is the best way to engage with, let's say, an urban local body or any government department for that matter, to trial out the technology and to move forward in promoting some of these technologies to solve the cleanliness related issues, sir?
This is a very pertinent question, because most of the startups, they have ideas at a conceptual level, and to bring it to a real life model and to scale up requires a lot of technological intervention, which you find in places like incubators. We were lucky that the place where I was working, we had a few incubators who managed to anchor these ideas and give them transform them into viable products, which we could use, and we could reduce our wastage to a large amount. But this kind of thing is not available everywhere. So more and more startups, those who are aspiring to become startups, they should always try to validate their concepts, what they're trying to do, go for activities like patents and all. This helps a lot, helps to garner finance, and at the same time helps them to go for big markets, also helps them to scale. So what we did, that we created single window delivery of services, where various universities, finance, and to a large extent even the environmental bodies came together and helped them, tried to give them ideas regarding how their product is faring with regard to different measurable parameters of pollution or efficiency or finance. And then we ask them to revise their models. And through that process, there are like 8, 9 ideas which are like ready to go in the next 5 to 6 months from a place like Rourkela, which is a small city. But this thing has to be scaled up. And also in the finance areas, we have to look for the securitization of their assets, and at the same time, how the clearing mechanism goes. Because as you know, startups in this field can fail many times. And under this kind of a system, if the assets are frozen, then it really gives a very bad message and prevents startup to actually go ahead with more ideas. So these kind of things requires a lot of support from the government, from various bodies like the Chamber of Commerce and from other banks. And if this kind of an enabling environment is given to them, I think the startups will come up with great ideas and definitely solve the problem that we are facing with waste management.
Thank you very much. Very insightful observations there. Just a quick note, for the audience, that if you have any questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat box, and we will take them up. We have a few minutes towards the end for Q&A. I'm moving over to Ms. Durix from Paris. Ms. Durix, you spoke about several interesting things, while describing the single-use plastic ambition, or to completely get rid of single-use plastics in Paris. And you mentioned an interesting story about how shopkeepers in Paris have now been incentivized, or are being incentivized, to allow refill of bottles. This is a very important behavioral change, which I'm sure many of us who have gone to Paris as tourists would never have had this experience, because everybody wants to sell you plastic bottles, not let you refill the bottle. So speaking of this behavioral change, this is something very, very critical. And most of the startups, while they may have excellent technology, they don't know how to bring about behavioral change. And this becomes a stumbling block to rolling out some of these solutions. What do you have any suggestions or any more interesting tips and anecdotes like this, which might help these startups to combine an element of behavioral change along with their technology which they are bringing out?
Thank you very much for raising these very good points. Actually, I see two levels of interaction to make innovation of startups enter in our daily life. One of the panelists in his introduction was talking about the importance of for innovation to be scalable. This is really the critical point. First of all, for innovation, we need to test solution in real life condition. And in the example of Paris, to get shopkeepers and consumers feedback on quality, price, and many other parameters to adapt the technology and the solution. I will give you an example. The city of Paris conducted last year a test of reuse in one entire neighborhood. We had one street with all the shopkeepers proposing reusable packaging for the food and beverage to take away. This has been a success and full of learnings. And for 2022, we are planning to develop 30 new neighborhoods to test the transition at a larger scale. And we realize for reusable packaging, we need a standardized model. So we are going to test that on Paris. And second of all, this is the point that you raised. This is essential to mentor the change for consumers and habitants, because single-use plastic become really part of our daily life and is really practical. For example, in Paris, we want to reduce the use of plastic bottles and increase the use of tap water, particularly water fountains in the public area. Having a significant numbers of facilities, water fountains, installed and functional is a first start. But how to engage people to drink tap water and consider it safe drinking? In that purpose, we built on the behavioral science knowledge and created nudge around the fountains. Nudge are basically positive messages or indirect suggestion nearby the fountains that will influence habitants to use them and moreover feel safe about drinking tap water. And we have first positive feedbacks on the use of nudge, and I think we will keep on using them. And to conclude, I believe that new technology new technology solutions should be really combine both tests at a larger scale, the scalability points, and behavioral knowledge to be the closest to the consumer's needs and expectation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Durix. I'll move over to Wilma. Wilma, first question for you. I'll take up from where Ms. Durix left it at the nudge theory or the use of nudges. How do we nudge more women entrepreneurs to come into this sector? You can speak from your own experience, or you can also tell us from some of the gaps you have seen in the ecosystem for more women to be here. That's my first thing. And there's also an audience question for you, which is really asking you about any key policy recommendations that you might have, which enable more startups to work with the urban local bodies and the municipalities to try out their solutions. So 2 questions for you, Wilma.
So as far as women entrepreneurs go, I mean, we see that many young today are wanting to be in a space where they, are contributing to solutions. So waste management is a perfect space to come into, to actually bring in capacities, bring in our, what we have perhaps as natural tendencies to, as women, to be more empathetic. So all of those qualities that we have fit in very well into entrepreneurship and women entrepreneurs in waste. The only thing is that we need to really understand that at this point of time in India, waste management continues to be a very low priority. And it's a low priority for the waste generators. It's also a low priority in some sense for the government. So therefore, our patience and our ability to be resilient is something that an entrepreneur will need very much when she or he steps into this space. But I do believe that in the last 20 years, things have changed a lot. I was very happy to hear that user fee now is becoming a common term across India. It's there in our regulations. It's a key factor for really entrepreneurs developing and having a revenue stream so that their businesses are not just profitable, but their businesses are meaningful. Because when we step into the space, we do want social inclusion and availability of minimum wages to all the workforce that we have. I would urge women with, especially women who have a possibility to take up a second career. If those of them who have taken a break from their careers previously because they've stopped to take because they've had to step back on account of their families, these are the women that can come bring in all their past experiences and come into the space. In our own team, our COO, our CFO, all of them are people who have joined us as a second career. So this is something that, and we really urge people to also, it's great to be a volunteer. It's great to contribute as a volunteer, but coming into the space full time, coming into the space with all the experiences that you brought previously is something that we need as of now. So even as a volunteer, you can contribute, but it would be even better if people come into the space as full-time employees or as entrepreneurs. Sorry, but your second question was...
The second question was related to any policy-related suggestions or inputs you might have, which allows startups to work more efficiently with the government.
Yes. So basically now we want the government really to have a policy, especially when they bring in RFPs. And we would like to participate in these RFPs, but there should be a great transparency in which the selection takes place. And also the RFPs should reflect the solid waste management rules. So segregation at source is mandatory. For any RFP, that has to be integrated as a first step, that the entrepreneur is given the opportunity only to collect segregated waste. So the RFPs need to be structured well and need to reflect the solid waste management rules. Again, I would I would again emphasize very, very strongly on the need for user fees. We will not be able to fix the problem because remember 60 to 70% of our waste really is low grade. Sale of this waste to a recycler does not bring you the appropriate revenues to meet all your operational costs. So between industry that must pay and the generator that must pay a user fee, these are the two policies which need to be strictly enforced for holistic, robust business models.
Thank you very much, Wilma. I see some questions coming in from the audience, so maybe we'll take a few of those. This is a question for Chaubeji. Can we know more about the Chhattisgarh experience on the grievance redressal system?
Well, because the state of Chhattisgarh is primarily an agricultural state, like I told you, and the cities over here are pretty small. So people are not that versed with using mobile applications for grievance redressal. And also somewhere in the Naxal infested areas, the connectivity is also poor. So we thought that because it would be better to have a toll-free number where they could interact with a human and not through an app, because there are certain people who are technologically challenged as well. That is changing, of course, with time and education and as the time progresses. But of course we needed to have a call center in which the executive can interact with them in local languages. That is also very important, because sometimes the call center executives may only speak in Hindi or English, but in Chhattisgarh people are usually speaking the dialects of Chhattisgarhi. In fact, in Bastar they speak different languages, Godi, Halbi, etc. So we employed call center executives who could interact with them in their local languages. The complaint was registered and a comprehensive dashboard was created. Also, once the dashboard is created and the complaints are resolved, they were given a stipulated timeline in which the complaints would be resolved. For example, the removal of a dead animal of sorts, the timeline was given in hours. So if that was not resolved, obviously the citizen can complain again. But if sometimes our sanitary inspector, marks that the complaint has been resolved, wherein actually the complaint has not been resolved, so that, and if that is closed, so that complaint would not be closed until the citizen says himself that the complaint has been successfully or has been resolved to his or her satisfaction. So that is one thing that is important. Also, the ULBs, the urban local bodies, were given ratings on basis of their grievance redressal, and the annual appraisals of these administrative employees of these urban local bodies were based on the ratings that they got in the grievance redressal. For example, if somebody got an A for all 12 months, he would be given a rating of A. If somebody got B, and accordingly. So that, because their careers dependent on the grievance redressal, they took it very seriously. And this is being monitored at the minister, chief minister level also, and at the district level by the collectors as well. So that is why the Nidan system of grievance redressal is a pretty robust one. Also, because this was launched when SBM1 was there. So eventually, Government of India launched the Swachhata app. So we had basically two areas where we could look for grievance redressal. So what we did was that we interlinked all these two. We made sure that the complaints of Nidan are also reflected in the Swachhata app and vice versa, so that there is one single dashboard where our ULB executives can have a look and help resolve the complaints. Because if we keep on having dashboards and if we keep on having apps for grievance redressal, that would not solve the purpose. So we have an integrated thing. And also a few years ago, the 14420 helpline was also launched based for the septic tank cleaning. So that was also integrated with this. So all these three live helplines work in tandem, and the ULB executives have access to a single dashboard. So this is the model of grievance redressal in a nutshell, I guess.
Thank you so much. I hope that answers the question. There is a question for Parida ji. Sir, you mentioned that waste to wealth out of waste is something very critical during your as part of your policy. But the question is that there may be certain cultural hesitation against using the products which have been made out of waste. So how do the businesses nudge citizens to buy the products which have been made out of waste, and what are the kind of opportunities in this space? Maybe if you can throw some light on that, sir.
Definitely, this is one of the areas where people they shrink off from waste, and they think that what is the utility of these products. Let me share with the entire team about the experience that we had with the organic manure, which is branded as Swachhata in Odisha. HNDUT department came up with this brand, and we tried to do a lot of awareness activity among people. Look, the waste that you are producing, especially the organic waste, is being converted to manure. And you can use it in your kitchen gardens, you can use it in schools, you can use it in various agricultural programs. Many farmers were buying a manure at a very higher cost. Now we are producing a very cheaper alternative from the waste products. So a lot of awareness activity among farmers, among people, among those dwelling in the urban areas went into consideration. Apart from that, we tried to assess the quality of the product. As you know, the products that are made from waste contains a lot of heavy metals, a lot of other undesirable components. So we send the produce to different laboratories to benchmark the quality. So through these processes, we managed to create a market, create a demand for these products. So the basic challenge that entrepreneurs, startups may face is how to do a level of benchmarking. We have different components of benchmarking, like how safe is the product. We can get that from different laboratories, certified laboratories. We can also do a lot of awareness activities, especially with plastics, the kind of products that we make from different plastic products. Even for the construction and demolition waste, we can create certain products which can be used in our day-to-day life. So the idea of designing this product, the USP behind every product has to be clearly decided, and it has to be benchmarked so that it is safe and it is acceptable by people. So under such situation, I think the startups can really create a demand, create a market, and also while scaling up, uniformity of the product is again very important. In many cases, we have seen that while scaling up, we face a lot of problems. The quality of the product reduces. The waste material, whatever refuse is there, the chemical composition of the refuse usually gives us a different result. So it is very important to actually homogenize the entire thing and create a uniform product for the market. So these are some of the checkpoints that every entrepreneur or startup has to look out for.
Thank you so much. We have several more questions, but in the interest of time, I will probably take the last two questions. And I'm really excited to see this being such an engaging discussion. The first question is to Maya as an investor. Maya, often we see investors hesitating to invest in companies that do or are dependent on government for business, right? And especially in the waste management sector, we see that government is obviously the biggest kind of customer for the services which the startups are offering. And the reasons for these may be multifold. Could be the difficulty in kind of winning these tenders or RFPs. It could be, the payment delays, which sometimes are inherent to the process and so on. So I guess the question to you is that, as an investor, how would you, what would be your outlook on companies in the waste sector, especially those that had a lot of government dependency or dependency on kind of government projects, and how would you kind of de-risk this?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a tough one, and I'll kind of explain the investor perspective, which is that as an investor, when we look at an organization and that organization's primary customer is a customer where there are very long lead times, and sometimes there are certain uncertainties around when the revenue gets recognized. That becomes difficult from a planning perspective. And so as investors, we sometimes feel that those are organizations where we need to be a little bit more wary. That said, it is very important, as you pointed out, Anand, that in this space, anyone who's working in this space, anyone who wants to work impactfully and at scale in the space, government is the obvious partner and is the obvious customer. And so, there are more and more investors who are coming into the space now who are understanding that a balance needs to be maintained, that just because a startup or an organization has government as a primary customer, that isn't a reason to be significantly wary. But what we would look for is a balance in the portfolio. As with any company, we always say, or with any organization, we always say, don't have, only one customer type, because you want to make sure that you have a little bit of risk diversification. That's the same thing that we would say to any company who's also working in the waste management space, which is from a business model perspective and from a customer base perspective, to have some level of diversification, because that enables, as an organization, your cash flows to be a little bit smoother and more consistent. And also from a fundraising perspective, it gives investors a little bit more comfort around how you're going to maintain your own business.
Thank you so much, Maya. As a moderator, I would love to continue this discussion, and I can see the audience also has questions, but really, unfortunately, we are out of time. We are actually over time. So with this, I think, I will wrap up this session with a sincere note of thanks to each and every one of our panelists. You have brought your experience. You have brought, a real on-ground experience to the benefit of the startups who are listening to this talk. And as I told you, this will be recorded, and I'm sure it will be played many times over by aspirants to the Swachhata Challenge to understand better how they can approach this waste management sector and what are the kind of problems they can solve. So with that sincere note of thanks, I am winding up this panel discussion. Really, it was excellent to hear all your views. Thank you once again.
Thank
Over
you.
to the moderator, please.
Much.
Okay, I think then we have come to the end of this program because this was the last item on the agenda. So I think, yes, please go ahead, please.
Thank you so much for moderating the session, and it was a very insightful panel discussion that we had, and I'm sure every participant and every attendee in the session will be going away with a lot of interesting takeaways. Thank you very much to everybody for joining the session. We will now be closing the session. Thank you.